Okay, so let's take a look at a dispatch scenario. In this case, we are looking at the driver chat messages here, and we want to look at what to do in the event that you receive a technical difficulties message. Drivers have the ability to send predefined messages, and in this particular case, this is what the driver has opted to do. Now, it's a very broad and kind of vague um, message that could point to many things, but it's just sort of an indicator for us to do some investigation. Obviously, the driver is unable to complete his fare for one reason or another, and so we want to determine if this is a system issue or if it's a user issue. And what we find in most cases is that the issue is with the driver, and so part of our job is to coach that driver. So I think you noticed that the driver chat messages disappeared here. Um, our dispatchers are probably working on it. It looks like they popped back up, so I'm not sure what that is. Perhaps maybe a glitch or something. Maybe the server's taking some time, but we can still do some investigation, right? This trip was obviously recently completed, but if you look here at the map, there is some kind of residual data from the actual booking. Now, currently, the driver is orange, which is to indicate that he is available. So that means that his trip was cleared. Dispatch responded to the message and assisted the driver. So one thing that I want to avoid is a knee-jerk reaction to this message, right? We want to identify the issue because what we don't want to do is clear the issue without really doing our part to look into what was the cause. Because by doing that, you're setting yourself up to have to deal with this issue again. And really, part of our job at dispatch is to educate the drivers in terms of how to properly use the system to get the most out of it. So the driver sent multiple messages. I'm just going to switch screens to our wall board so we can see the driver 861. He sent 1, 2, 3 technical difficulties messages. So, and that was over a span of about 7, 8 minutes. And if we looked at the screen, it was showing at the time an ETA of 26 minutes. So by sort of deductive reasoning, we can see that obviously he was nowhere near the address because it was still showing an ETA. He was nowhere near the drop off. So it leads me to believe that there was an issue at the drop off. So a better way to kind of remove the guesswork is by going into the first we want to check the completed tab, and it looks like this was a trip for James at Maranta Avenue in Sunnyvale. So we want to go ahead and find that trip in our bookings tab. And I think I had already set this up, but what we can do is just type in the driver reference number in this field, and then conduct a search for the date of operation, and it will pull up their trips for today. Now you notice these first two are new, which means they have yet to dispatch, and then we've got a completed one down here. So if we view this trip, we can verify this is James at Maranta Avenue, um, and we can see the driver's route down here at the bottom part of the screen. We can see the arrive time. We can see the time that the trip was created, and then the scheduled pickup time for it, which was 8:45. And then we skip down to the assign. This is likely when the driver accepted the fare, and then when he arrived at the pickup location. Now, I want you to pay attention to the contact and close. Contact corresponds to a timestamp when the driver metered on, establishing contact. Um, and close here is to indicate the time that the trip was closed. So you've got contact and closed um, at the same exact timestamp, which leads me to believe that the system had to be forced to remove this trip, um, or had to be manually cleared. Um, so that kind of um, makes sense because the driver was sending messages that he was having technical difficulties. So we want to look at the cause, and in order to do that, we want to view the logs, right? And so the logs give us kind of an overview. It shows us when the trip was dispatched, right? And then a few more system events. And then you see here that the point in time in which the driver accepted the fare at 8:32, as we saw in the job details. We can see that the driver was booked shortly after, um, and that he arrived at 8:46, again, as we saw in the job details. Now we see here he reads a message, and then at 9:06 he's sending a message about 6 minutes after he reads that message, about 7 minutes approximately, and starts to send messages every couple of minutes to dispatch. Um, and then we see here an action taken in response to these multiple messages. You see here the value of the message is the technical difficulties message, which is a predefined message that sits in the driver app. And that's something that the driver can use when they're having an issue. And because it is so broad, we like to take it case by case. It looks here that a rule was removed by Ben, who was our current dispatcher, and the driver, and that generated a message to the driver, which he read at 9:12, that the distance restrictions have been lifted. So without going further into it, it seems to me that what happened was that the driver um, got to the drop-off location, forgot to meter off, drove away from the location, and then could not clear his job. And because there are proximity rules attached to when a driver can arrive, when a driver can meter on, and when a driver can complete the fare, excuse me, it's likely that the distance restrictions were preventing the driver from being able to clear the fare. So clearly here there is an issue with the driver not using the system properly and then creating work for our dispatcher. So this is a case where um, we want to reach out to the driver and make them aware that they did not properly complete their fare. Now, um, we don't necessarily want to chalk this up as user error because we still want to identify if there was an issue in the cab, right? If the driver was experiencing a low cell coverage in the area, which was preventing him from being able to clear his job, then we want to establish that and make a note of it. If the driver was, if the driver metered off but nothing happened in iCabby, um, then there seems to be a break in the connection between the taxi meter, and the tablet which displays the iCabby system. So uh, those are details that you would want to reach out to the driver and verify, because that will also kind of give us a more um, developed picture of what's going on with this driver. Now, if that's not the case, and so there are many scenarios that could have contributed to this issue. If the driver does mention that Let's say, for example, he metered off, but his job in iCabby did not clear. Um, then a follow-up question could be, well, did you remove your tablet from the vehicle at any point earlier this in the day in your shift? And the reason why we typically ask that is because a driver might um, drivers have the ability to remove the tablet from their vehicle, and the tablet is linked to the taximeter via Bluetooth connection. And that connection has a range, and if the driver takes the tablet away from the vehicle outside of the range of the Bluetooth connection, then the connection will be broken, and obviously the tablet and the meter will stop communicating. Therefore, if the driver accepts a job in that state, he may be able to trigger an arrival in the system, but when he goes to turn his meter on, the meter will not be communicating that data to iCabby, and iCabby will not, the state of the job won't change based on the meter functions. Um, so that's kind of a little bit uh, more info into how the components of the system are related, and we can cover that in another video. But this is just kind of to give you some overall tips on troubleshooting this particular type of scenario where the technical difficulties message is sent by a driver. Now, in this case, it looks like Ben may have contacted the driver. Um, the driver said, "Yeah, I can't complete my fare." Ben may have followed up with, "Did you leave from the drop off location before you metered off?" The driver may have admitted to this. And so Ben chose to remove the distance restrictions, which is fairly simple to do. It's just a simple keystroke on the dispatch screen. Um, if we go to, it doesn't look like anything is is dispatched at the moment, but if you look at a oh, hang on, let me go ahead and clear this so we can see. We can actually go to the book tab and then right click and remove rules is R. If you select that, it'll actually allow the driver to, it will manually override the proximity rules, and the driver will be able to complete his job even though he's not at the within the required proximity. Um, so that was the kind of quick solution, but we don't want to revert to that or default to that as a fix for this without first conducting an investigation, because if in this particular case, it seems that the driver created an issue for himself by not properly completing the trip at the drop-off point. It seems like maybe he forgot to um, turn his meter off, drove away from the location, and then just created some issues for himself. So in that particular case, we want to educate the driver and just let him know and reiterate to him, sir, you have to be at the drop-off address um, so that you can properly clear your job yourself. Um, and that's something we want to do because this is a big waste of time for dispatchers. It creates more work. This is an issue that the driver created that could have been avoided had he properly completed the trip at the destination. Um, so that's about all. We can cover a bit more in other videos, but this was just kind of a um, I guess not so brief overview of a very real dispatch scenario with a live call. All right, that's about it. Let me know if you have any questions.